I am atheist and an author of works regarding atheism. I do not believe in the existence of gods or other supernatural things. Much to my disappointment, as I firmly believe I would make an excellent Ghostbuster, the weight of the evidence is such that a naturalistic, science-centric point of view about reality is the only rational way to think. And yet, scholarship regarding the subject of atheism seems to me to have become rather poor. This could be intentional, as the overwhelming majority of authors who have written about the topic are not atheists themselves, but instead Christian apologetics, misrepresenting the positions of atheist arguments in favor of strawman arguments that are easier to debunk using the specious reasonings common to theology. For example, if one searches for works regarding the history of atheism, the top result you'll get on websites are titles such as The Origin of Modern Atheism by Michael Buckley and The Twilight of Atheism, The Rise and Fall of Disbelief in the Modern World by Alistair McGrath, who are both theologians, not atheists. Even the Wikipedia entry on atheism mistakenly defines the meaning of atheism to what it claims the word literally means in ancient Greek, when in fact atheism is not an ancient Greek word, and therefore cannot have such literal meaning to start with. The Wikipedia entry also claims atheism is related to Asian philosophies and religions, such as Hinduism and Buddhism, when in fact these philosophies have no direct connection to the development of atheism, nor do they use the same reasonings as atheists to reject a belief in gods, as these Asian philosophies still retain supernatural beliefs that genuine atheists have rejected for hundreds of years. In fact, early atheist literature discredits beliefs in these Asian supernatural concepts alongside those in European religions such as Christianity. Unfortunately, this poor scholarship has led to widespread confusion even within modern atheist circles about what atheism actually is. No doubt because many self-identifying atheists today do not actually read the foundational texts of atheist literature, but instead get their so-called atheism from internet websites and popular internet-based groups claiming to be atheist or to teach atheism. Many of these sources are not reliable ones, as they use vaguely defined terms that eerily reek of the same strawman arguments invented by Christian apologetics to confuse people about what atheism is. They also, as previously mentioned, cite inaccurate information about the history of atheism to make it appear to be a less well-defined intellectual movement than it actually is. In this video essay, I am going to address one of these confusions, which is how atheism is sometimes claimed to be divided into the camps of strong and weak atheism. The distinction between strong and weak atheism, as originally coined by Anthony Gerard Newton-Flew in 1979, has generated extensive debate in philosophical and religious circles. The concepts have also appeared in the writings of others as positive and negative atheism, or implicit and explicit atheism. Weak atheism, which Flew defined as the absence of belief in gods, contrasts with strong atheism, which explicitly asserts the belief that no gods exist. I contend that the concept of weak atheism is inconsistent with the principles of evidentialism and naturalistic philosophy that underpin atheistic reasoning. Furthermore, I will argue that the modern interpretation of agnosticism as a middle ground between atheism and theism is a misrepresentation of its historical origins and philosophical intent, as defined by Thomas Henry Huxley in the 19th century. By analyzing the logical inconsistencies of weak atheism, the historical context of Huxley's agnosticism, and the universal applicability of evidential reasoning to all deities, I will demonstrate that atheism requires logical consistency and a rejection of supernatural claims. A recent disagreement I had with the proponent of dictionary definitions of atheism highlights an additional challenge to maintaining the historical and philosophical rigor of the term. Here, Ben Davis, an admin for Atheism United, which is both a large Facebook group for atheism that claims to be an atheist-only think tank, claims that atheism should be defined by popular dictionary definitions, such as those found in the Oxford Dictionary, or through a Google search, which describe atheism as a lack of belief in gods based on the Greek origin of the word, meaning without, and theos, meaning God. This belief is reiterated by Brian Sapient, the founder of the group, who is also founder of Rational Response Squad, which also claims to be an atheist activist group. On his website, Sapient clearly cites dictionaries to define what atheism is and threatens to ban anyone from his groups who disagrees with this definition. However, this etymological justification for the definition of atheism is a flawed one. The word atheism is not an ancient Greek word, as is frequently claimed by these dictionaries. While it draws on Greek roots, the suffixes ism and ist are not Greek, but instead are modern English, and the use of these suffixes were popularized in the 17th century to describe newly created words that describe specific ideological positions. Furthermore, atheism's historical usage for hundreds of years has referred to a specific intellectual position associated with naturalistic and science-based reasoning. In fact, the term atheism doesn't even derive from the word atheos. It comes from the German word atheismus, first penned by 17th century philosopher Matthias Knudsen, who openly rejected gods and the supernatural in pamphlets he distributed in the German city of Jena. Knudsen claimed he was part of a community of other like-minded people whom he was trying to recruit others into. The ideas in his pamphlets became widely discussed and cited, and this led to the development of atheism as an intellectual movement. 96 years later, by the time that German philosopher Baron d'Holbach published his famous Système de la Nature in French, the terms he used, athée and athéisme, were translated as atheist and atheism in English, as these had already become established as the English translations for the ideological movement. Système de la Nature described a naturalistic philosophy that became known as atheist materialism, and it was the most influential atheist book for several centuries, with its claims championed by atheist supporters and criticized by numerous Christian apologetics. All of modern atheism can be traced directly to these two writers, and many of the arguments made to reject belief in gods used by atheists today from this point in history. Consequently, appealing to dictionary definitions as a justification for the meaning of atheism while ignoring the historical evidence for the development of atheism as a distinct ideological philosophy that developed starting in the 17th century is a classic example of the definist fallacy, the erroneous assumption that a word's definition in a dictionary reflects its full historical and philosophical context. For example, defining atheism solely as lacking belief in gods ignores its rich history as a specific ideological movement. Such reasoning is no different from Christian apologetics, who redefine terms to suit their beliefs or political groups, who manipulate definitions for rhetorical purposes in order to win ideological debates when the evidence weighs against their arguments. Atheism's intellectual tradition and its foundation in naturalistic, science-centric inquiry cannot be reduced to a simplistic etymological analysis. Much like empiricism and Epicureanism, which share a historical lineage in that they are both named after the ancient Greek philosopher Epicurus, but are distinct concepts, atheism must retain its precise meaning to avoid conflation and misunderstanding. Okay, this is Future Carey here, speaking from the future after the video was first edited, so I can make a small footnote. The claim that Knudsen used the specific word atheismus originates from secondary sources in German discussing Knudsen, as the original pamphlets were suppressed and are said to be lost to history. We only know of their existence and content due to secondary sources. After completing this video, I figured people are still going to argue with me on this issue, so I was going to show the oldest secondary source I could find, referencing Knudsen, which is said to be Pierre Bayle's Dictionnaire historique et critique, first edition from 1697, but I have not been able to find a copy of an edition that old. I was able to find an 1820 edition, which uses the word atheismo and atheismum, which Google claims are words for atheist and atheism in the interlingua language. This doesn't seem correct, as interlingua is a constructed Latin language invented in the 1920s. It is possible the word is older than the constructed language, but I am not familiar enough with interlingua to form that assessment. The next oldest source is Thomas Mortimer's Student's Pocket Dictionary of Universal History, published in 1789, which I did in fact locate a scan of on the Internet Archive. However, this entry claims he taught Atheism, so it is possible this is more close to the word he used to describe his beliefs.
I am shocked. Shocked. Well, not that shocked.
I should also point out that both of these sources use different spellings for Matthias Knudsen himself, which is not entirely unsurprising because many languages still didn't have specific spellings for words during this period of history, and what mattered most was the pronunciation of the words, not how they were spelled. Nevertheless, my point still stands that atheism and atheist are not ancient Greek words, and therefore trying to justify what they should mean by what the ancient Greek word atheos meant is a fallacious argument. Regardless of the specific word used, the concept of atheism is a modern one that developed to describe a specific ideological movement that only started up in the 17th century. What Christian apologetics criticizing these people considered atheism to be in their writings is immaterial to what the people who developed the movement considered it to be. This ends my footnote. Now please enjoy the rest of the video. Before I dive deeply into the inherent irrational nature of the concept of weak atheism, I want to point out that Antony Flew coined the term in the 1970s while self-identifying as an atheist, but he later abandoned atheism to become a deist who believed in a creator God. While this does not in itself discredit his belief in weak atheism as a concept, it does demonstrate the guy who came up with the term abandoned atheism later in life. This doesn't have anything to do with my argument. I just want to ensure there is no confusion when talking about what Antony Flew I am referring to, because he also wrote about deism in addition to atheism. Now then, Antony Flew's distinction between weak and strong atheism defines weak atheism as a lack of belief in gods, and strong atheism as the active belief that no gods exist. On the surface, this distinction may appear reasonable, offering a spectrum of positions between outright disbelief and a lack of belief. However, weak atheism fails to hold up under scrutiny when analyzed through the lens of evidentialism and naturalistic philosophy. Atheism, fundamentally, is rooted in a rejection of supernatural claims due to their incompatibility with the naturalistic, science-centric worldview. This worldview asserts that beliefs should be based on empirical evidence and logical reasoning, and it rejects claims that cannot be substantiated by evidence. No atheist has evidence that it's impossible for any God to exist, but atheists do have evidence that other people's claims for the existence of gods lack credible evidence. And so, when an atheist uses naturalistic arguments to reject the existence of a particular deity, such as the Christian God, the same reasoning necessarily applies to all deities with similar traits. Deities, by definition, possess supernatural qualities that defy the natural laws of the universe. Thus, if one deity is rejected on evidential grounds, all deities must also be rejected to maintain logical consistency. For example, consider the argument that the existence of the Christian God conflicts with the body of scientifically collected evidence about reality. This same argument can be applied to other deities, such as Zeus, Vishnu, or Odin, as they share the defining supernatural traits that contradict naturalism. If a weak atheist rejects the Christian God, but entertains the possibility of other deities, they are contradicting the evidentialist reasoning that led them to reject the first deity. A consistent atheist must reject not just individual gods, but the very concept of deities altogether, as well as any other supernatural idea, as the supernatural is inherently those claims which defy the natural laws of reality. Additionally, they term weak atheism's allowance for uncertainty about deity's existence undermines a core principle of evidentialism, that the burden of proof lies with the claimant. Unless evidence supporting a deity's existence is presented, there is no rational basis for entertaining the possibility of such a being. This evidentialist critique demonstrates that weak atheism is an incomplete and logically inconsistent position. as a core ideological position of atheism is to reject the idea of gods because they are irrational, one cannot be an atheist yet meet the conditions necessary to be this weak atheist category. Consequently, the very idea of weak atheism is inherently nonsensical. Now let's talk about agnosticism, because agnosticism is often claimed to be a position identical to or close to weak atheism. I want to address it in this essay, as a claim of being agnostic has often come up when people try to defend their position as a so-called weak atheist. Contrary to what some people claim, the term agnosticism is neither ancient Greek, nor does it describe the beliefs of any ancient Greek philosophers. The term agnosticism was expressly coined by Thomas Henry Huxley in the 19th century as part of the atheist intellectual movement. While it is often misunderstood today as a middle ground between atheism and theism, its original meaning was far more specific and tied to atheistic reasoning. Huxley introduced the term as a response to criticisms of atheists who were accused of claiming certainty about the non-existence of gods. He argued that atheists did not claim to know that gods did not exist, but instead pointed out that theists had no credible evidence to support their claims that could withstand scrutiny, and therefore it is more rational to be uncertain of those claims than to believe them until such time credible evidence is provided. Here are some quotes from Huxley about agnosticism. It is wrong for a man to say that he is certain of the objective truth of any proposition unless he can produce evidence which logically justifies that certainty. This is what agnosticism asserts, and in my opinion, it is all that is essential to agnosticism. Agnosticism, in fact, is not a creed, but a method, the essence of which lies in the rigorous application of a single principle. Positively, the principle may be expressed. In matters of the intellect, follow your reason as far as it will take you, without regard to any other consideration. And negatively, in matters of the intellect, do not pretend that conclusions are certain which are not demonstrated or demonstrable. Agnosticism, therefore, was not a creed or standalone ideological, separate from the atheist movement, but instead a methodological critique of theistic arguments in defense of atheism, and why it was rational even if atheists didn't claim to have evidence against the existence of deities. Huxley lived in a time when modern science was still in its infancy, and much of the scientific data we possess today about the nature of the universe and physics that are used to discredit belief in deities did not exist at the time. Huxley and others of the 19th century were having debates against theists. Huxley's agnosticism was deeply influenced by Immanuel Kant's philosophy, particularly the limitations of human perception and the emphasis on rational inquiry. Huxley maintained that humans could not claim knowledge of anything beyond empirical evidence and rational analysis. This was not an admission of uncertainty about gods, but a defense of atheism against accusations of dogmatism. By shifting the burden of proof onto theists, Huxley reinforced the evidentialist foundation of atheism. How Huxley used the term agnostic is also how other atheists of the time period did. For instance, Robert G. Ingersoll, an American orator and self-identified agnostic, delivered lectures in the late 19th century titled "Why I Am an Agnostic." Ingersoll expressed skepticism about theistic claims due to their lack of evidence, stating, "Is there a supernatural power, an arbitrary mind, an enthroned God, a supreme will that sways the tides and currents of the world, to which all causes bow? I do not deny. I do not know, but I do not believe. I believe that the natural is supreme." This statement from Ingersoll clearly reflects Huxley's idea that agnosticism is not about indecision, but about withholding judgment due to insufficient evidence. Furthermore, contrary to certain things such as the Wikipedia page for Ingersoll, anyone who actually reads surviving copies of Ingersoll's many letters and pamphlets can clearly see that Ingersoll does not believe the Christian God exists. He is not unsure about the topic. He wrote many hundreds of pages ripping apart Christianity and showing how it is irrational and inconsistent to the laws of nature. In his pamphlet titled "The Gods," Ingersoll wrote a lengthy tirade rejecting the very concept of deities. Over time, the term agnosticism evolved in popular usage to describe a state of being unsure about the existence of gods, rather than Huxley's original emphasis on the unknowability of such matters. However, what is clear is by the mid-20th century, agnosticism was used by some to denote uncertainty or indecision about the existence of deities. And even within some atheist literature produced during this time, the distorted version of the term appears without any mention of Huxley's original position that coined it. At present, I've been unable to pinpoint precisely how this shift occurred, but my theory is that due to the rhetorical style of atheist authors, such as Huxley and Ingersoll, that the finer points of their argument was either misunderstood or intentionally distorted by Christian apologetics in order to create a strawman definition of agnostic that was easier to criticize. Due to simply outnumbering atheists, these Christians using the strawman definition of agnosticism in their lectures were far more popularly heard by the general public than atheist authors. So it's easy to understand how the popular meaning of the term agnosticism became disconnected from the reason why the term was created and used in the 19th century atheist literature. Even Richard Dawkins has used the distorted term of agnostic in his writings that is disconnected from Huxley's original meaning of the term, showing that even popular atheist authors of the present day misunderstand the term. Yet the fact remains that these modern interpretations of agnosticism as a state of uncertainty or neutrality about God's existence distort Huxley's original intent. Agnosticism was never meant to apply to individuals who had not engaged with the concept of gods, such as babies or those unaware of religious ideas. To be agnostic in the context of its creation requires familiarity with the claims of theism and an evaluation of their evidential basis. Consequently, agnosticism cannot be a label for ignorance or indecision. It is a specific critique embedded within atheistic reasoning. Changing its meaning causes Huxley's core arguments defending atheism to become distorted and meaningless, arguments which are still used today by atheists to debunk claims of God's existing. This has contributed to the misunderstandings about the atheist position that have resulted in inherently contradictory concepts like strong and weak atheism, taking root in modern authorship about atheism. It is not only that the term agnosticism has been corrupted, that weak atheism is nonsensical. One of the central arguments against weak atheism is the universal applicability of evidential reasoning to all claims of deities existing. The scientific method and naturalistic philosophy do not allow for exceptions or special pleadings. If one deity is debunked using naturalistic arguments, then likewise all deities with similar traits must also be rejected. This principle ensures consistency in applying evidential standards to supernatural claims. Throughout history, countless claims about gods and supernatural beings have been subjected to scientific scrutiny and consistently debunked. From ancient polytheistic deities to modern monotheistic gods, the arguments supporting their existence have failed to withstand empirical investigation. For instance, claims of divine intervention, miracles, and creation myths have been refuted by advancements in physics, biology, and cosmology. Beliefs in ghosts, goblins, horoscopes, souls, and other supernatural things have all been debunked. Given this track record, there is no compelling reason to entertain the possibility of any deity's existence, unless new evidence is presented. Weak atheism's allowance for uncertainty about deities undermines this evidentialist approach that is common to atheism. By entertaining the possibility of a deity's existence without evidence, the idea of weak atheism contradicts the principles of naturalism and skepticism that underpin all atheistic thought. To be consistent, atheists must reject all supernatural claims unless credible evidence is provided. This rejection is not a claim of absolute knowledge, but a rational stance based on the lack of evidence. Now, I have had this debate with many people over the years, and I have come across probably every rebuttal you can think of. Here are my responses to these common rebuttals to my argument, so that you do not waste your time trying to repeat the mistakes of others in the comment section of this video. Claim number 1. Agnosticism is a separate category from atheism. Some people try to argue that agnosticism is a distinct position between atheism and theism, representing uncertainty about God's existence. However, this interpretation misrepresents Huxley's original intent. As previously discussed, agnosticism was a methodological critique developed within atheistic reasoning, not a standalone category separate from it. Agnosticism emphasizes the limitations of human knowledge while maintaining that theists bear the burden of proof. Thus, agnosticism complements atheism rather than existing as an intermediate position. Whenever atheists tell a Christian the burden of proof is on them to provide evidence for the existence of their God, and that until such evidence is provided, disbelief is the more rational position. Even if the atheist lacks evidence to discredit the existence of the God, the atheist is adopting an agnostic position. That is what the term actually means in atheist philosophy. Trying to change the term to mean someone who is just unsure whether gods exist opens the door to atheists who believe in supernatural things, as it removes the term from its actual philosophical roots that describes a specific atheist position that rejects belief in gods. Claim number 2. Conceptual variability among deities. Some people try to claim that not all deities are identical, and that some, such as deistic gods who create the universe and then remove themselves from it to no longer interfere, might be compatible with naturalism. However, even the claim of a deistic creator god conflicts with the principles of naturalism by claiming supernatural origins for the universe. While less interventionist than theistic gods, deistic gods still lack empirical evidence and are subject to the same evidential critique as all other kinds of deities that superstitious people claim to exist. Without evidence for the existence of a creator god, there is no rational reason to believe one exists regardless of whether they are claimed to still interact with their creations. Claim number 3. Epistemic humility. Some people try to argue that maintaining openness to the possibility of a deity reflects epistemic humility, an important principle in science that states human knowledge can be incomplete or incorrect, requiring updating when the prior beliefs are found to be mistaken. However, this is like suggesting that if you know there is no evidence for a magic pot of leprechaun gold to be found at the end of a rainbow, that it's a reasonable pursuit to try to reach the end of a rainbow on the chance that you're wrong. Epistemic humility does not require a person to entertain unsupported claims. Rejecting other people's claims that their deities exist due to a lack of evidence is not a claim of absolute certainty, but instead a rational conclusion based on available information. Openness to new evidence does not necessitate belief or uncertainty about unsupported claims. This is basically the same argument that Huxley made when defining agnosticism and why it is more rational to disbelieve in the existence of gods when there is no credible evidence for their existence. Claim number 4. Weak atheism as a broad category. Weak atheism is often defended as a broad label encompassing anyone who lacks belief in gods. While this inclusivity may have become a popular idea among those who were influenced by writers such as Antony Flew, this idea of weak atheism is one that dilutes the logical rigor of atheism. True atheism, as grounded in evidentialism and naturalism, requires consistency in rejecting all supernatural claims. Weak atheism's allowance for uncertainty undermines this consistency and creates conceptual ambiguity that makes the term atheism become meaningless. While it's possible for words to take on new meaning in language, there is no rational reason for why the narrow definition of a word expressly created in the 17th century to define a specific ideological viewpoint, and which has held that meaning for hundreds of years, should change to include the very kind of beliefs the term atheism was expressly developed to be separated from. Calling people who believe in ghosts, astrology horoscopes, reincarnation, and other supernatural ideas. An atheist, when the term was specifically developed to reject supernatural beliefs, is nothing more than an equivocation fallacy that confuses the meaning of atheism by creating unnecessary ambiguity, especially when other terms, such as non-theism, were created around the same time in history as atheism to describe people who don't worship gods but may hold other kinds of supernatural beliefs. What is claimed by some people to be weak atheism is actually just various kinds of non-theism, distinct from atheism, erasing the original exclusive narrow definition of the word that identifies a group of people who otherwise have no name, which is the original naturalistic science-based atheists, results in the term to be appropriated by Buddhists, Hindus, and whoever else that are part of other religions that have completely different worldviews that are incompatible with naturalistic science-based viewpoints of reality. The original atheist becomes pushed out of the group if the meaning changes to permit the significantly larger population of superstitious people into the group. This is already happening, as with my example of the United Atheism group, as well as just by looking at the comment section of this video and other past videos on my channel. I fully predict that these superstitious people will comment on this video without even watching it to defend their redefinition, because their goal is not to actually learn about atheism, but to defend their superstitious religious infiltration of the atheism movement. Essentially, the term atheism becomes meaningless if it changes to allow for superstitious people merely because they don't worship gods as part of their religions. The original atheist can no longer identify using the word when it changes to mean people, such as Taoists and Buddhists, and other people can no longer easily understand what the atheist worldview is, because it will then encompass a large number of different religions, none of whom all agree with each other, resulting in atheism losing group cohesion and being a useless label as a result. The atheist is the smallest demographic in the world due to the naturalistic, science-centric rejection of gods, but that becomes untrue if you redefine atheism in such a way it includes nearly the entire population of China, because now you've added Buddhists, Confucianists, and Taoists into the mix. The original atheists become ostracized within their own circles by the attempt to redefine it so broadly when it was meant to be narrow. Perhaps that works for those who are trying to distort the term to lose all meaning, which is a common behavior among Christian apologetics, but it is not something atheists should be permitting, as it is, quite frankly, an attack on the atheism movement to divide and weaken it. If they cannot defeat the atheist worldview in a debate, they will just change what atheism means so they can bury its worldview behind a sea of superstitious noise. In conclusion, weak atheism and the modern misinterpretation of agnosticism fail to meet the standards of logical consistency and evidential reasoning that define atheistic thought. As demonstrated, rejecting belief in one deity necessarily entails rejecting all deities with similar traits, as the same naturalistic arguments apply universally. Furthermore, agnosticism, as coined by Thomas Henry Huxley, was never intended as a middle ground between atheism and theism, but as a defense of atheistic reasoning against accusations of dogmatism. To uphold the principles of naturalism, skepticism, and evidentialism, atheism must reject the concept of deities and other supernatural ideas altogether, and not entertain the possibility of their existence without compelling evidence. By demanding consistency in the application of evidential reasoning and resisting definitional fallacies, I reaffirm the rational foundations of atheism and call for others to reevaluate their usage of terms such as weak atheism and agnosticism in light of their historical and philosophical contexts. If you have enjoyed this video essay, please check out other videos on my channel and subscribe for new videos about atheism and related political philosophy topics. In the coming days, I will be releasing a lengthy video discussing the true history of the atheism intellectual movement and sharing the stories of those who championed it in the face of ostracization, imprisonment, and even death. Also share this video with others to help combat misinformation about atheism that has become widespread, and risk steering the movement away from genuine intellectualism to instead accept superstitious beliefs that are just as fallacious as any of the claims made about God's existing.